Captain Ibrahim Traoré has become a symbol of African resistance. At just 34 years old, he represents a bold rejection of foreign domination, especially French neocolonialism. He's young, unapologetic, and popular among African youth and Pan-African thinkers across the continent. But not everyone supports him. In fact, some African presidents and ruling elites view him not as a hero, but as a threat. Why? Because Traoré is shaking the foundations of the post-independence order that has kept many African leaders comfortable and many African people in poverty. Let's unpack why some African leaders quietly oppose Traoré's revolution and what it reveals about the state of Africa today. When Traoré took power in October 2022, it wasn't just another military coup. It was the second one within a year in Burkina Faso, and it came at a time when jihadist violence, economic despair, and public anger were boiling over. The people were tired, not just of terror attacks, but of foreign military bases, corrupt politicians, and puppet leadership that answered more to Paris than to Ouagadougou. Traoré didn't rise by election, he rose by demand. Demand from the streets, demand from a generation that wanted to break free from France's grip, IMF dependency, and endless promises with no sovereignty. One of his first major acts? He expelled French troops from the country, following in the footsteps of Mali and later Niger. He shut down French media outlets, ended military accords, and began forging new ties with Russia, Turkey, and other non-Western partners. But here's where things get tense. While many ordinary Africans saw this as long overdue, many African governments saw it as dangerous. Why? Because Traoré represents an alternative model of leadership, one that doesn't rely on colonial powers to survive, one that challenges the very legitimacy of the current African political class. He's young, he's military, he doesn't wear suits, he speaks in plain language, he doesn't spend years campaigning, he moves with force, certainty, and clarity. That makes him popular with the youth, but terrifying to older elites who have built decades-long careers on diplomacy, foreign aid, and compliance. Take Ecowas, for example, the West African bloc that has openly condemned military takeovers in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. They've threatened sanctions, isolation, and even military intervention, often echoing talking points that sound suspiciously like those from Washington or Paris. Yet these same organizations rarely speak out with equal passion against rigged elections, foreign exploitation, or economic strangulation by global lenders. So the question must be asked, why is a military-led anti-colonial revolution so much more offensive than foreign domination? Because Traoré isn't just a man, he's a symbol. He's proof that African countries don't have to play by the old rules, that a government can survive without bowing to France, that a people can rise up and demand their resources back. This makes Traoré dangerous, not just to Europe, but to African leaders whose own youth are starting to ask, why can't we do the same? And that question, circulating in the minds of millions of young Africans, is more powerful than any protest. Behind closed doors, some African leaders are working to undermine Burkina Faso's movement. They support regional sanctions. They meet with Western diplomats to plan transitions that delay real sovereignty. They issue statements about the importance of democracy while their own countries remain under elite control. Some even go further, supporting disinformation campaigns that paint Traoré as a puppet of Russia or as a dictator in disguise. But the real reason for this resistance isn't about process, it's about power. Traoré's model exposes the failure of a leadership class that has done very little to uplift its people since independence. Burkina Faso sits on rich gold reserves. It's a strategic location in the Sahel, with links to Mali and Niger, both of whom have also rejected French military presence and neo-colonial influence. Together, these three countries have formed the Alliance of Sahel States, a growing bloc of military-led nations that are pan-African in rhetoric and anti-imperial in action. This alliance is what truly scares regional elites. It's not just one man standing up. It's a movement, a philosophy, a declaration of self-determination. In this model, Africa controls its own resources. Africa defines its own security. Africa chooses its own partners, whether that's China, Russia, Brazil, or itself. Compare this to the traditional Ecowas model, where leaders attend Paris summits, accept IMF conditions, and rely on foreign troops to maintain domestic order. The contrast is too sharp to ignore, And for the youth watching across the continent, the message is clear: we can govern ourselves. Here's where it gets even more serious. In April 2025, Algerian forces shot down a Malian surveillance drone near the border town of Tinzawatine, claiming airspace violations. But Mali, backed by Burkina Faso and Niger, saw it differently. They believe Algeria is harboring jihadist groups that operate in the border regions and retreat into Algerian territory after attacks. This suspicion, now years in the making, exploded into diplomatic crisis. As a result, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger all withdrew their ambassadors from Algeria. Algeria, in turn, pulled its own envoys and closed airspace to Malian aircraft. The fallout was immediate and revealing. It signaled that some of Africa's so-called allies may be playing both sides. And it raised serious questions about whether Algeria sees itself as part of a unified Africa or as a regional power prioritizing its own security at the expense of Black-led resistance. This has even led to speculation about an Arab versus Black Africa divide, where North African states, comfortable with their European ties, quietly work to undermine the rise of anti-imperial movements in the Sahel. Traoré isn't fighting just one war. He's fighting on every front, against insurgents, against neo-colonial media, against corrupt African leadership, and now perhaps against the old racial hierarchies within the continent itself. But even with these pressures, his people remain loyal. Why? Because they see results. Roads are being built, clinics are opening, teachers are returning to classrooms, and for once the youth feel seen, not used. This is why Traoré remains so feared. His strength isn't just in rejecting France, it's in proving that a new kind of African leader is possible. One who listens, one who builds, one who stands, not on foreign grants, but on national will. African leaders who have built careers on polished speeches and handshakes with the West feel exposed, because Traoré is reminding Africans of what real leadership looks like. And that's why the pressure to silence him is growing. So what happens now? Will the African elite succeed in isolating Traoré? Will international media twist the story beyond recognition? Or will more African nations break free and join the new wave? One thing is certain, not all skin folk are kinfolk. And Traoré's greatest challenge may not be Europe. It may be the African presidents who have made peace with dependence. So what's your take? Is Traoré being betrayed from within the continent? Can Africa truly unite when its own leaders fear real freedom? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like, subscribe, and follow Echoes of Empires, where African truth speaks louder than foreign headlines.